Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be tackling a topic that doesn't really get talked about that much.
Yeah,
Male loneliness and mental health.
right.
And it's kind of a paradox, right? We hear
Right.
about all this stuff like statistically men are more prone to loneliness and mental health struggles and suicide rates are way higher
Yeah.
among men than women. And yet it seems like there's this huge barrier
Right.
for men to actually get help or even admit that they have any of these issues.
Yeah, precisely. It's like a silent epidemic. And
Yeah.
the thing that is even more concerning is that loneliness isn't just like a feeling or,
Right.
an emotional state. It actually can have a huge impact
Wow.
on your physical health, like we're talking about heart disease, stroke, even shorter lifespan.
Really?
Yeah, so that's why this is a really important deep dive to kind of understand how big this is and hopefully make some change.
So like admitting to feeling lonely or needing help, is that like going against like the grain of how men are supposed to behave in society?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good observation. Societal norms really put a lot of pressure on men to just like, suck it up and be tough,
Right.
instead of
Yeah.
reaching out. And that can create a lot of problems.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And I was thinking about the landscape of friendships too, because I've read that like, as guys get older, their friendships kind of
Yeah.
take a back seat,
Mm.
especially compared to like women's friendships.
Yeah.
Do you think that has anything to do with this like loneliness epidemic?
Oh, for sure. Think about it this way. Like, a lot of men have like those close buddies that they had, from college or the military or whatever. But, as life goes on and, you get married and have kids and stuff,
Right.
your priorities change. And if you don't make an effort to keep those friendships going, they just kind of fade away.
Yeah.
It's not that guys don't value those friendships. It's just that they don't really have the space to, keep them up like they might have in the past.
And then what about on top of that, like with the rise of,
Mhm.
social media and all that,
Yeah.
that's keeping us connected in a lot of ways, but is it also contributing to more isolation? Like instead of having genuine human connection.
It's really interesting. Like, it's a double-edged sword because you have all these social media platforms that can help people, stay in touch and find communities. But the problem is that it's not the same
Right.
as face-to-face connection. You could have like tons of friends online, but still feel totally alone in your everyday life.
Yeah.
And that's where the danger is, because loneliness is actually connected to inflammation and higher levels of stress hormones,
Wow.
which over time can lead to all kinds of physical health problems.
So it's not just about like feeling sad or isolated. It's like an actual biological thing.
Exactly. And when you
Yeah.
add in the mental health crisis among men, the whole situation becomes even more urgent.
Yeah.
Like that statistic you mentioned before about men being 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think is at the root of that?
It's heartbreaking. Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with the stigma that surrounds mental health.
Yeah.
For men in particular, it's like they're expected to just man up and deal with their problems on their own,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously prevents them from actually getting help when they really need it.
Exactly. Society conditions men to think that being vulnerable is like a weakness.
Right.
And admitting that they're struggling with their mental health goes against that, that idea of what it means to be a man.
Right.
But we need to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness. It actually takes a lot of strength to admit that you're struggling and to get help.
Yeah, especially when you think about, the pressures that a lot of guys face, demanding jobs, money problems, having to be the provider.
Yeah.
All that can be so overwhelming and make it so hard to open up and say, hey, I'm not doing okay.
Exactly. And that expectation that guys should just be stoic all the time can also be made worse by the fact that there are some people out there saying that men are just inherently problematic or irrelevant.
Sure.
And this is where the concept of toxic feminism comes in.
Okay.
Now we have to acknowledge all the progress that feminism has made
Right.
for women's rights and equality, but like any movement, there can be parts of it that get distorted or taken too far.
Okay, so you're saying that while the core principles of feminism are super important, there are some interpretations or like offshoots that are maybe contributing to men feeling alienated.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing this emergence of narratives that are saying men are inherently oppressive or irrelevant, and that can make men feel undervalued.
Right.
And if they're already struggling with loneliness, it just makes them feel even more isolated.
Yeah.
It's like they're told to be strong and stoic,
Right.
but then they get dismissed or ridiculed for being those very things.
It's like a no-win situation.
Yeah,
So like a cultural tug of war almost.
right. Yeah, and these narratives can have some pretty serious consequences, especially for men who are already feeling kind of marginalized or disadvantaged.
Totally. Like, where do you see that happening specifically?
One area that's been a big concern is family courts.
Okay,
Right.
there have been a lot of cases where fathers feel like they're being discriminated against in custody battles.
Right.
Or you look at the media, men are often portrayed as like bumbling dads or incompetent husbands,
Yeah.
which just reinforces those negative stereotypes.
Right.
It's not about saying that women don't face challenges too,
Right.
but those portrayals can really add to the frustration and resentment that some men feel. And that makes it even harder to close the gender gap and create a more fair society.
So it's not about like blaming women or saying men are the victims.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing that these harmful narratives hurt everyone
Exactly.
and make it harder to deal with the real issue of, male loneliness and mental health.
Right.
So where do we go from here? Like, what can we actually do to change this?
Well, one of the most important things is creating safe spaces where men feel comfortable talking about their emotions and, not being judged for it.
Okay.
That could be like support groups, online platforms, or even just informal groups of friends.
The key is to make it okay for men to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And I've heard about those like Movember campaigns
Yeah.
that focus on men's health, including mental health. Are those actually making a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I think they've been really helpful in raising awareness and giving guys resources.
Okay.
But we need to do more to make those kinds of programs more accessible and more tailored to what different men need.
Right.
Because for some guys, a support group might be a good fit, but for others, it might be something more casual, like a sports league or just meeting up with friends regularly.
Right. So it sounds like having strong friendships is a really important part of this.
Oh, absolutely.
But how do we encourage that when it seems like everything is making us more isolated?
I think a big part of it is emphasizing the importance of community.
Oh, okay.
Encouraging men to do things they enjoy with other people, like joining a sports team or a hobby club, or even just meeting up for coffee or a game night. It's about creating those opportunities for guys to just be themselves and, let their guard down and realize they're not alone.
It's like we need to bring back that village mentality,
Yeah. Yeah.
where everyone's looking out for each other.
Yeah, and it's not just about men supporting men,
Okay.
Women can be allies in this too
Right.
by challenging those harmful stereotypes and talking about gender roles in a more balanced way.
So it's not about men versus women.
No, definitely not.
It's about working together to create a better environment for everyone.
Exactly. When we try to pit men and women against each other, it just hurts everyone.
Right.
We need to be more open to talking to each other and understanding where each other is coming from.
Yeah, because men and women might face different challenges, but we all want the same things,
Yeah.
connection and respect and just to feel good.
Yeah, exactly.
But what about men from different backgrounds?
Right.
Like how do we support men who might be facing extra challenges because of their race or their ethnicity or their socioeconomic status?
That's where thinking about intersectionality becomes really important.
Yeah.
Recognizing that a man's race and his culture and his economic background can have a huge impact on how he experiences loneliness and mental health and whether he's able to get support.
Right. So one solution doesn't fit everyone.
Exactly. We need to create programs and services that are culturally sensitive and that men from all different backgrounds can access.
Okay.
That might mean working with community leaders or faith-based organizations or groups that are already trusted within specific communities.
So it's about really tailoring our approach
Yeah,
to meet the needs of different groups.
exactly.
This is a lot to think about, but it seems like the main takeaway is that we need to be having these conversations.
Yes, definitely.
And we need to be providing resources and creating a more understanding environment.
Right.
And it's not something that's going to change overnight.
Mm-hmm.
But the more we talk about these issues and raise awareness, the better chance we have of breaking down the stigma and helping men feel comfortable getting the support they need.
Absolutely. And even on an individual level, there are things men can do to make a difference.
Like one.
Well, one of the most important things is to make their relationships a priority.
Okay.
Like staying in touch with friends and making an effort to spend time with them.
So like actually reaching out, making plans, and following through.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
takes effort to maintain those connections.
Right. And what would you say to someone who's listening to this and maybe they're struggling silently with these issues themselves and they don't know where to turn?
Well, first of all, I would say you are not alone. A lot of men go through this, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help.
Yeah.
Talk to a friend or a family member or a therapist.
Right.
It can make a huge difference.
So it's about breaking the silence and realizing that asking for help is actually a strength, not a weakness.
Exactly. And there are so many resources available now more than ever before, like online support groups,
Yeah.
therapy apps, helplines specifically for men.
Wow.
It's just about finding what works for you and taking that first step.
And what about those of us who aren't struggling ourselves?
Yeah.
How can we be better allies to the men in our lives?
It can be as simple as checking in on your male friends and family members,
Okay.
letting them know that you're there for them and listening to them without judgment.
Right.
Just creating that space where they feel safe opening up and they know they're not going to be criticized or dismissed.
So it's like extending that same compassion and understanding that we talk about with other social justice issues to this issue of male loneliness and mental health.
Right, because at the end of the day, this isn't a battle between men and women. It's
Hmm.
about recognizing that we're all human and we all need each other.
Yeah, and working together to create a world where everyone can thrive.
Exactly.
It really feels like we're getting somewhere with, understanding this whole thing better. We've talked about a lot,
Yeah.
like the societal pressure and how that contributes to loneliness and the whole needing to, foster those real connections and challenging those stereotypes.
Hmm.
As we wrap this up,
Yeah.
is there like one big takeaway that you really want our listeners to think about?
What really stands out to me is that this isn't just some theoretical problem.
Hmm.
It's something that affects all of us in some way.
Mhm.
I mean, think about it. Everyone probably knows at least one guy who's going through this silently.
Right.
And we can all do something to change how people think about this, to get rid of the stigma and to make it easier for guys to get help.
It's like even those little things like checking in on a friend or listening to them
Mm-hmm.
can actually make a difference.
For sure. And to anyone listening who might be struggling right now, please know that you're not the only one going through this.
Yeah.
And asking for help isn't weak, it's brave.
Right.
There's help out there and things can get better.
I like that, focusing on the hope for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we talked about a lot today, those real steps we can take to deal with male loneliness and mental health,
Right.
both as individuals and as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This was a really insightful conversation.
Yeah, I think it'll really get people thinking.
I hope so.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring this topic. Reach out to the guys in your life. And let's all work together to create a world where everyone feels valued and connected.